What is up, guys? This is Kyurem from the Trinity of Lift, and today I'm bringing all of you guys my updated Star Seraph Shaddolls deck profile for this brand new July 2015 format. So, ever since the ban list dropped and I learned that the film did not get hit at all, I immediately started brainstorming and testing some Shaddolls list around. And after playtesting it a little bit, I found this Star Seraph build to be something that I am liking quite a bit. As again, personally for me, I do prefer the Star Seraph build just because it's a more aggro of a build compared to the Control-y build. And again, after just tuning this deck up, I just wanted to bring all of you guys a very solid Star Seraph Shaddolls list for this brand new format. So, of course, let's just jump right into it, starting off with the main deck. Alrighty, so starting us off, we have our 3 copies of Shaddoll Falco, because Falco can help keep us in the game by constantly recycling our resources that we do send to grave. And he is our level 2 tuner, obviously, to get into our pretty significant synchro plays. So, of course, we have to have the 3 Falco. Next up, we have our 3 copies of Shaddoll Squamata, because he is our Shaddoll Upstart Goblin, essentially, as we can Foolish him to the grave whenever we want with Mathematician and Foolish Burial, and then Squamata can become any Shaddoll that we might want. So, of course, just having that deck thinning aspect to help us see our Star Seraphs or our big main deck boss monsters is really, really good. Then, next up, we actually have quite an interesting number of Shaddoll Hedgehogs. We have actually 3 copies of Shaddoll Hedgehog for this list. Now, the reason why I did decide to run 3 Hedgehog is I actually got this idea off of the top Shaddoll deck from the Euro Nationals, as after thinking about it quite a bit and talking around with some friends, the 3 copies of Shaddoll Hedgehog can actually be very good for the fact that you can get away now with running 5 Shaddoll Fusion spell cards by running that 3rd Hedgehog, as you can just see it more often and just use its flip effect quicker to get that Shaddoll Fusion. And also, as you'll see later in this list, there are also ways that we can also abuse Hedgehog's flip effect quicker. So, again, it just helps you get away with running less fusion spells, and so you can commit your cards to running other things. So that is why I do run the 3 Hedgehog. Next up, we have our 2 copies of Shaddoll Beast. As 2 Beast is fairly standard, I feel 3 is way too much, as it can't clog, as it's awkwardly level 5. So I find 2 to be the happy medium, as we once we send 1, we can constantly keep looping it on field with our Shaddoll Falcos, so we can keep digging through our deck consistently. Then, finally, for the last Shaddoll we do run, we have the 1 copy of Shaddoll Dragon, as Shaddoll Dragon can turn our Mathematicians or our Foolish Burial into an MST. So, of course, we have to have the 1 Dragon for just simple back row removal. Alrighty, so moving on to the other parts of the deck, going straight into the Star Seraph engine. We have our 3 copies of Sovereignty, and then we have our 3 copies of Scepter. Now, this is the standard Star Seraph engine. I really don't have to go over much with this, as whenever there is a Star Seraph deck, this is the engine that you have to run in it, obviously, because it can just get you so much advantage whenever you can combo. Now then, moving on to the more generic Shaddoll support, we go straight into the 3 copies of Mathematician. As Mathematician, whenever he is normal summon, we can Foolish any level 4 or lower monster, which is pretty much a Shaddoll. And so he is just our standard +1 guy of this deck. Whenever we do open Mathematician, it's always a very, very good game, as he can just open up a ton of plays for your deck. Then, next up, we have our 2 copies of Effect Veiler. As, in my opinion, just because this format is new, I didn't want to include the 3rd Veiler, and I wanted to commit cards to other parts of my deck. So I did decide to cut Veiler down to 1 in lieu of actually more trap cards. So that is pretty much why I do only run the 2 Veiler now. Alrighty then, finally for the last 2 monsters we do run, we have our 2 big boys of the main deck, I guess you could say. We have the 1 BLS and we have the 1 Big Daddy Dark Arm, because BLS is just too good not to run, and in my opinion, he kind of single-handedly won the Euronats, again, hilariously. If you guys didn't see that game, you should watch it. And then we have the 1 Dark Arm in here just for that early to mid-game momentum shifting and whatnot. So then, that will wrap it up for our main deck of monsters. Moving on to the spell cards, starting us off with our Shaddoll Fusions. We have our 3 copies of L Shaddoll Fusion, and then we have our 2 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. Like I said with Hedgehog, we now can get away with only running 5 fusion spells, because we do have the 3rd Hedgehog, so that we can see it earlier, so that we can just set it to flip it up again to search out our fusion. And so now that we're only running the 5 fusions, we can again commit our cards to other parts of our deck. So with that idea and that theory, I am actually really liking this lineup of Shaddoll fusions. Just again, because the 3 Hedgehog actually does make this lineup work a lot more smoother than one might think. Next up, we have just actually quite a bit of one-ofs now that I look at it. We start off with the one copy of Allure of Darkness because just digging through our deck faster with the Allure is really, really nice as we can help see our Star Seraphs earlier and whatnot. We have our one copy of Mind Control because every deck within this format right now, outside of Ritual Beast and the random Fire Fist deck, you can't just Mind Control one of their guys to fuse it away for your own fusion summons. So having the Mind Control to essentially neg our opponent one to make our own plays is actually really, really good. Then we have the one Foolish Burial because we can make this card become any Shaddoll that we want. We have the one Soul Charge to act as our just general strong monster revival spell. And then finally we have the obligatory staple Raigeki and the one Book of Moon because both of these spells are pretty staple, like I said, in almost every main deck. So, that will round us off for our spell lineup in this deck. Moving on to the trap cards, we have our 2 copies of Sinister Shadow Games again. Because we are running the 3 Hedgehog, the 3 Falco, and the 3 Squamata, we will actually find ourselves setting our Shaddolls quite often now. So, having ways to flip those cards up on our opponent's turn without making them attack us can just be very disruptive, and can also just get you free +1s by using Sinister to Foolish a Shaddoll and then flip another one face up. So that is why we do actually have the 2 copies of Sinister back in the main deck this time. Then we have the 1 copy of Shaddoll Core because 1 core is also pretty standard in any Shaddoll list, as we can use it for a standard Shaddoll material for our fusion monsters, as well as we can just use it for just basically just walling up every so often if we ever do find ourselves with a clear board and whatnot. Then, finally, for the 40th card in our main deck, I did decide to run the 1 copy of Emptiness for the fact that after playing around with things like Ring of Destruction and Torrential Tribute, I actually gravitated toward Vanity's Emptiness more or less for the fact that it can floodgate our opponent, and if you can make a huge board in Shaddolls, which you usually can, and then back it up with an Emptiness, you really can swing a lot of games in your favor. So that is probably why I decided to run the Vanity's Emptiness as our 40th card in our main deck. Alrighty, so now moving on to the extra deck, we have our 3 copies of El Shaddoll Nephilim, of course, because we have to run 3 of her. She is the best in this extra deck by far. If I could run 5 Nephilims, I definitely would, just because she is just so strong, as whenever we do try and fusion summon her, she can Foolish any Shaddoll from our deck to our grave, so she can pay for herself, essentially, as well as she has that floating effect and the catastrophe effect. So again, she has just so much things going for her that running less than 3 is not that advised. Next up, we have our 2 copies of El Shaddoll Window, because floodgating things like Satellar Knights and Burning Abyss to only 1 special summon per turn can just really slow them down, as well as just the innate resilience of Window with her not being able to be destroyed by card effects can also just get you out to things like Fire Lake of the Burning Abyss and whatnot. Next up, we have our 1 copy of El Shaddoll Shekinaga whenever we do find ourselves having to make a Shaddoll fusion with a Mathematician and a Shaddoll. And, of course, Shekinaga is also really good in stopping special summon monster effects. Like, again, this card is really potent against things like Satellar Knights. Then, finally, for the last El Shaddoll we do run, we have the 1 copy of Anoya Tylis, as Anoya Tylis is, of course, here for that Necros matchup, as she can shut it down just by herself. And even though we do not main deck a water monster in the main deck, we can still find ways to combo into her utilizing things like Shaddoll Core. So we have the 1 Anoya Tylis to round off our fusion lineup. Going straight into the synchros now, we have our 1 copy of Leo, just so whenever we have a Falco and a Nephilim on board, we can just make Leo to just get back us a fusion from Nephilim, and then have just our plays set up after that. So we have the Leo for just general beating, I guess you could say. Then we actually have 2 level 7 synchros in the form of 1 copy of Arcanite Magician and 1 copy of Clearwing Synchro Dragon. After not running Arcanite Magician for quite some time in Shaddolls, I actually started missing it for the fact that it just has a really good simple removal, and without it and just running the one level 7 that I used to run, I found myself always wanting to have that extra removal in my extra deck for things like Rogue and other decks that are not Necros, as I guess, again, I was just really, really missing that just simple destruction. So that is why I decided to try and find room in this extra deck to include Arcane Emission yet again. And then we have the one Clearwing, obviously, for that Necrons matchup, and to an extent the Clyford matchup as well. So that will be it for our synchros. Going right into the XYZs, starting off with the Star Seraph ones that we will be going into with that combo. We have our one copy of Deltaros, we have our one copy of Ouroboros, and then we have our one copy of Ptolemaios. Deltaros and Ouroboros are really self-explanatory. They are the ones that we usually will be going into with the Star Seraph combo, as both of them can provide some sort of good removal. And then we have the one Tellarknight Ptolemaios to use whenever we feel like our rank 5 plays are more important than the other plays that we can do with Ouroboros or Deltaros. Then, finally, speaking of the rank 5s, we have our one copy of Stellar Knight Constellar Diamond and our one copy of Pleiades. Now, Diamond is here, obviously, because we can actually make Ptolemaios with just 2 level 4s. So, of course, because of that, we can two level 4 combo into the Diamond, which is really nice against Burning Abyss, as well as we can just use Diamond generally to overlay over Deltaros too. So, again, this deck, this has pretty much no problem going into Diamond whenever you do play Burning Abyss. And then we also have the one Pleiades for the Ptolemaios, just so we have more reactivity on our opponent's turn, as Pleiades is still a very, very strong rank 5. Well, alrighty guys, I guess that will be it for my Shaddoll deck list for this brand new July 2015 format. I hope you all did enjoy as usual, and as always, this is Kyurem from the Trinity of Lift, and I'll see all of you guys in the next video. Peace out.